Thank you to Luke Turk and JT Bard for that amazing intro. This is the Campanile podcast. I'm Braden Leong.
I'm Ben Antono.
I'm Sid Sahasrabudhe.
So recently, Pally Sports have been returning this first season of them. And I know this Friday, actually, a football game or scrimmage happened. And did you guys hear like the gun team walked out because of a cheap call, like a block in the back penalty, and they walked out and just left the scrimmage?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of context of what happened. So if you guys want to fill me in.
Yeah, I heard that like the gun coach wanted to limit like the amount of plays through in the scrimmage, and then like there were just really high tensions the whole game, and the gun coach, like after the block in the back penalty, just like said, "All right, we're out, Pally," and just left, and like the whole team just dipped.
Wow, that's hardcore.
I think we should be focusing less on gun walking out and more on the idea that we're having full contact football games between two different schools without masks before we have real in-person learning.
There's
Well,
no
maybe-
masks.
I don't think there's masks.
Jeez.
Maybe like the gun coach, I was thinking like, does the gun coach like actually like, I know the rules let people play and there's a whole like a lot of people that want to play, but like maybe the coach at gun like doesn't actually want the contact. This is all speculation, but like.
I doubt it. I don't know much about the actual situation, but yeah, is that a recent development that we're allowed to have that? Is that a red tier restriction or a purple tier restriction that was lifted now that we're in the red tier? So
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I know cross country meets have been happening for a while now. It's for at least a month, but I think other sports are returning like now, basically.
I think that the prioritization of sports over real school is kind of an effect of the political pressure of the Let Them Play group that's kind of been going around pressuring school districts to like, let them play.
Is that a nationwide thing or just California or?
I think it's more so in California because we're the state that's had the strictest lockdowns and we have the most sports compared to like the East Coast where they don't really have like water polo programs, for example.
Yeah, that's fair. Huh. Wow, that's kind of remarkable that the Let Them Play lobbyists have been more successful than the reopen school lobbyists.
I think one of the things that contributes to it is the teachers. I think a lot of teachers have been not feeling comfortable returning to close proximity. And also in a lot of schools, like classes are indoors. Whereas like, I think more coaches are willing to like coach sports and they don't need as much like a lot of sports are outside, so they don't need as much like protective gear. And you can't really play sports virtually like you can do school virtually.
I think part of the issue might be that teachers would be at risk if you're teaching an in-person class. If we were in normal school, if we had 25 kids in a classroom, whereas coaches are generally on the sideline. Coaches are generally socially distant from their players, and it's a lot easier for them to be outside and have masks on.
Especially at Pally, do we want to talk about the two cohort controversy?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
I think we should.
So
Ben, you want to introduce that?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's been an issue for a while at Pally, at least, is that a lot of sport seasons have overlapping start and end times. So for instance, if you're like a cross country player and you want to play basketball, then the basketball season starts before cross country ends. So they don't let you play two sports at one time. So what ends up happening is there's controversy about like saving spots for cross country runners and like that sort of thing. One issue specifically is that they've kind of lifted that restriction because seasons are so short right now. A lot of the seasons are condensed to like a couple weeks rather than a couple months. So basically what they're letting kids do is like, for instance, if you wanted to play basketball and you're a cross country runner, you can go to cross country practice some days a week and you can go to basketball practice some days a week.
Ben, do you want to explain the cohorting system real quick and what its goal is?
I'm not entirely sure how the cohorting system works. Braden or Sid, do you guys know?
I've got info on the indoor sports, at least the basketball. I think that is a bigger, like the indoor sports is much a bigger deal. Like, indoors totally facilitates more like spread of COVID. And so I think that's being delayed. But as for the cohort system, it's kind of gone away in terms of like, well, each sport is supposed to be divided so that like no mixing can go in between sports. And like in the past, like I know swimming has had this where like one of the swimmers tests positive, then the entire team shuts down and like gets, I'm not sure if they get tested, but they shut down and be safe. But in this like new two cohorting system, like if like one person in any cohort is test positive, like there'll probably be like a ripple effect. Like every sport might have to shut down. So that's the danger.
Back to the swimming thing, actually. Even though she tested positive, nothing really happened with swimming. The coaches didn't communicate anything, and swimming kept going that day. They had
Jeez.
practices that day.
It was a false positive though, right?
Yeah, it was a false positive, but
That's
still,
good.
there's kind of a big issue with PAUSD's handling of any COVID cases if they happen during athletics.
That is kind of remarkable. Like I feel like in general, a lot of the issue has been, or just like an issue waiting to happen, is that there's been very little of a plan proposed if there's some sort of outbreak. They're kind of just like, we're gonna deal with it when we're gonna like cross that road when we have to. And like especially in school too, like they have the COVID health screener, but like, yeah, what happens if you like spread COVID through your sports and then there's no shutdown procedure there, so kids show up to school with COVID and then you have 10 cases of COVID on campus and they're asymptomatic. Who knows?
Honestly, going back to the football game thing, like competitions between two schools like in a physically close area is probably even worse, right? I know it's more desirable than like playing two sports. More people actually want to compete, but like people in school, like honestly, you can't really fix like people like seeing each other outside of like activities like hanging out as friends, doing stuff. But at this, people interact with people from other schools much less, and like those sports can like connect the two almost like school giant like cohorts, and that is probably even bigger of a risk.
I actually had a interesting discussion with Dr. Sarah Cody the other day. She said that she's supportive of sports restarting in that, well, everyone wants sports to restart because it helps with mental health for a lot of students. But the issue is that, first of all, they're restarting sports before school, which is not a great idea. And then they're also not restarting the other thing because not everyone plays sports. So they're not restarting the other programs that other students use to kind of help with their mental health and unwind a little, such as, choir, chess club, and whatnot. It's kind of been pretty uneven in favor of athletes.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think like, are there lobbyists that want choir back? Like, I mean,
I don't believe so.
Yeah, we'll see. It's kind of a crazy situation just because, like, especially for like prospects too. Like, if you're looking to go D1 or even D3 for a sport and you're talking to coaches and that sort of thing. Like, I know people who have committed to D1 sports teams and never played a game of varsity in their life. Like,
wow.
It's kind of insane.
Yeah, like for track, I know that they like have these competition meets each year, like these big invitational meets, and they're taking time from 2019 for the 2021 meets. Like they'll take like times from like a long time ago because like the last season wasn't an official season. And yeah, it's really weird how they're like receiving things. So like I don't even know how it would work. Do either of you like in recruiting for any sports or anything?
I'm not.
Neither of us. I think even more than recruiting, the bigger issue remains like student safety while playing sports. Personally, I think I play water polo and that's supposed to resume in about a month. I don't know if I'd feel safe maskless in a pool with people from other schools with full contact water polo going on. And I don't know if anyone should feel safe in a situation like that.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, same with like if you're playing a school that's outside of Santa Clara County, they have different restrictions. Like in like imagine some sort of state tournament, like that would be a nightmare. Like think about it. Like if you have schools that are from like a much less gung-ho about mask wearing community, what happens? Your entire team gets infected with COVID. Like that's not good at all. And then you bring it back to your hometown and it's just nuts.
Yeah.
Especially like
go ahead.
Especially for kids that like might be like they might be relying on a college scholarship or something to get into college. Like that's pretty like that's got to be a pretty insane situation.
And I think like a wider perspective on all these everything that's reopening, from sports to school to even like indoor dining, is that cases in Santa Clara County have stopped declining and they're just kind of flat now.
Mhm.
And as things continue to open up, we might not see an increase because of increased vaccinations, but I don't think we're gonna keep going down at this point.
Sorry, they've flattened. What do you mean by that?
Like the cases per 100,000 have remained constant instead of continuing the downward trend that we'd been
As
on
of
since like
when?
mid-January. For the past couple of weeks, I think the last 2 weeks we've been flat relatively.
I was looking at it the other day. It looked like we were still on a downward trend. I could totally be wrong. It might be like a parabolic curve. Not parabolic, but exponential. Yeah, wow. I mean, like I don't know if we'll see another spike, but yeah, we might see another bump. But what's kind of nuts, at least for me, I kind of had this realization recently, is that in Santa Clara County, like that spike that we had in January was like off the charts. Like that was so bad. And like people weren't really comprehending how bad it was. At least I didn't. I was being careful. I was essentially like sheltering in place and maybe leaving my house once or twice a week. But obviously social distancing and everything. But like it's nuts that like for a brief period, there was like maybe like a 5% chance that you would get COVID if you went outside or something like that. Like it was really everywhere.
It was everywhere. And I think that because I think we've gone over this in the podcast a few times, but just like, it's a numbing thing. Like the first few weeks, like March and April, everyone was like staying inside, stocking up on toilet paper, masks, whatever. Like, and it's getting worse, or not now necessarily, but like Thanksgiving, winter break, holiday season, there was such a big danger, and people just like get used to it because it's been there for so long. It's like part of their lives. Like I lived through the effects of COVID. I put on a mask. I like don't really leave my house as much as I used to, but I don't even think about like COVID in itself, if that makes sense. I like see it on the news sometimes, but like I don't really think about it other than like it's just a part of life now, and people don't think of it as bad as it used to be necessarily.
I think in general, people in Palo Alto they haven't really cared about the virus, because I think it comes from a position of privilege, because you know it's not disproportionately affecting wealthy suburban people. But I think the issue is that everyone in Palo Alto quarantined, wore their masks for 4 weeks, but now the only part of that that's kind of stuck is wearing your mask. And like people aren't really social distancing anymore. They're really just doing whatever they want. And I think if people continue doing that, we might see another small bump.
Yeah. I personally am not super worried, but it is a scary idea.
I have a question for you guys. I was thinking about like how they should roll out the vaccine, and I know how they're doing it, like certain groups doing it this way, like, oh, if you're over a certain age, you get it. If you're an education person, healthcare worker, you get it. But I was wondering, should they like try to give it to other people who like are going out the most? I know that like is not as ethical, but it might be more practical, just because the people who are going out the most have the highest chance to spread it. What do you guys think about that?
I think those people need to exercise some self-control and stay home if they're going out for reasons that aren't necessary or for work.
So I wrote a story on this recently, and I interviewed this guy, Philip Grant, who ran the Johnson & Johnson vaccine trial at Stanford. Really nice guy, super informative, super smart. But he gave me an interesting perspective, is that once the most at-risk people are vaccinated, what's most important is the fact that you have a lot of like in lower income communities, the amount of people living in the house is greater. It's like maybe 4 to a house versus like 6 to a house. And then a lot of these people are working blue collar jobs, which put them in contact with other people more often. And so just because of the way that they're forced to live their lives, they become exposed to COVID at higher rates than in more like affluent communities. Like, so the issue is that like, it's really weird, like the fact that, and same with like people that are making lifestyle choices, like if you're going like clubbing or something, or like going to parties, like obviously you don't like deserve to get the vaccine is what people like are going to say.
Yeah.
But in reality, it makes the most logistical sense to give you the vaccine because it's like you're putting yourself less at risk.
Because you getting a COVID, if you're on clubbing, doesn't just affect you, it affects other people. You can spread it. Your family could get it. If you live with older relatives, they can get it and have serious health risks. So it sucks. Like if someone's going out all the time and not wearing their mask, not caring, like, and then you're staying at home, seems annoying. Like, why would they get the vaccine first? But I don't know. It's difficult to think about because, like, should they get it first because like that might help most people.
I think that would be a form of kind of rewarding their bad behavior, because if you're just giving them the vaccine because they haven't been following any guidelines. And I think after they vaccinate the seniors and the healthcare workers and the teachers, I think the next priority has to be, blue collar workers who have to leave the house to do work, not the people who've been working from home for the last 1 year. So.
What do you guys? I have a brief opinion on one thing. Is that this is probably like a little bit controversial, just because it's like moral. But personally, I think that if you have the opportunity to get a vaccine, if there's a wasted like if there's a vaccine that's going to go out the door, if there's a vaccine, or if you can get a vaccine appointment and you're not necessarily taking it away from somebody who's at risk, you should get it. Regardless of how old you are, regardless of how at risk you are, you should get it, because the more people that get vaccinated, regardless of how at risk you are, just like the closer we are to herd immunity, and it really does benefit not only yourself but everybody else.
What if they
absolutely
did have surplus vaccines? I know they have surplus ones that they don't give. What if they like put them at like the Oracle Arena and did like a drive-through, get your vaccine there?
They might be doing that. I don't know if they're doing it at Oracle. I think they're doing it at Levi Stadium.
Really?
Yeah, I think that they're utilizing basically every big venue they have. In LA, Dodger Stadium was like the craziest. It's like a hotspot. That's where like the most vaccines were being distributed.
But is it only like the people who are already okay on the list, or is it everybody? Because I feel like there should be some for maybe like just first come first serve, just because you don't want like people going out and spreading it.
So I think there are definitely every day at like the vaccine centers. If you go to like I don't know if you go to hospital, but if you go to like CVS where people are giving out vaccines or something, there's a line out the door at the end of the day. Just people like hoping for an extra dose. There are people that volunteer for days just to maybe get a chance at a dose. Like there are like people are like willing to like take time out of their day and like try to get an extra dose that would go to waste if people like cancel their appointments, or if people like just and it's, I don't know exactly how they're distributing it. My guess is by age. But like there are lines out the door and like crowds of people just like trying to get a hold of a vaccine, even if they don't have an appointment. And I think in most other parts of the country, like I can't remember if it was New York Times, but some publication did a big story on Florida and the fact that people were just like camping out in cars for like days, just like trying to get a vaccine, because there wasn't like a ton of logistical, it wasn't like super well logistically managed, in the sense that it was hard to book an appointment. It was hard to tell if doses were going to get thrown out. So you just kind of were gambling.
Yeah.
I think that's not necessarily the case here, just because I think the system, like the way that we're doing appointments in Silicon Valley, at least, is pretty efficient, and we're not really wasting that many vaccines, but obviously there's always room for improvement.
And the vaccination thing has become more personal. Like I'm starting to know people that are getting vaccines. A lot of my teachers got the first dose, and I think some of them are getting the second dose. And I wonder how that affects like their opinion on returning to school. What do you guys think?
Well, with our teachers, it's the issue that all the paused staff got priority for vaccinations because we're leading the county in reopening. So it's because we started reopening without teachers having the vaccines that they're getting the vaccines. But I think it definitely makes me feel safer about returning to school, because by and large, teenagers aren't the ones at risk from this virus. It's older people, it's our parents, it's our grandparents. So knowing that a student can't accidentally infect a teacher is very comforting to know.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
we got Sid here, our co-founder, co-editor-in-chief, and co-president of Pally's own satire magazine, MMAG. Sid, what does the M stand for?
Well, the official line is that the M stands for magazine, but I'm gonna let you guys and our viewership in on a little secret. The M actually stands for misinformation, as in information that is false.
It's ironic. It's kind of meta. It's like
It is
it's like misleading what the M stands for.
misleading.
The M
That's another
itself
M
is
word.
misinforming.
Okay, keep telling us about MMAG.
So we had this idea about a year ago when we were looking at the Onion, and we thought, we should make we should make a satire magazine for Pally. And we looked to see if anyone had done it before, and there was a website called The Daily Pillage that a couple of students had made a few years ago. But that was entirely online, and we figured that, online websites won't get a lot of viewership, at least not from Pally students. So we wanted to make a print magazine that would go to everyone's houses in the school. So at first we considered making it a newspaper, but then we decided that we kind of wanted to focus on some design aspects also. So we went with magazine.
Cool. What are some stories that we've been writing or you guys have been writing?
Well, we have a couple of stories so far. One of them was kind of Pally students' reactions to SAT subject tests being canceled. And it kind of played on how Pally students will say that they're fighting for social justice and whatnot. But when kind of equity increasing things like SAT subject tests being canceled happen, kind of, some true colors show. And we made up some people and had them say like, oh, I was always posting Black Lives Matter stuff on my Instagram story, but I really don't see the reason for these subject tests to be canceled because, I think I could have gone to 800. I think I should go to college. And then we have a couple more. We're kind of writing about all sorts of different topics. So we have politics, ASB politics, sports, lifestyle, opinion, and obituaries, which haven't been written yet. But the obituaries are going to be pretty joking of stuff that nothing that's actually dead, of course.
Yeah.
But stuff that moved out of Pally people's lives. Perhaps Matt Hall, no longer with us at Pally.
There we go.
Or
rest
Tony's
in
Chicken.
Peace, brunch in the Mac or lunch in the Mac.
Yeah. An open Mac. That's another one.
Yeah.
Tony's Chicken, Mr. Rappaport. Lots of different subjects for these.
Sid,
Yeah,
any
what
tips
happened?
on how to make a funny satirical article in a magazine?
Well, I think the first step is just making up all of your quotations and giving your sources pretty ridiculous names. That always helps.
Got it.
What's a good name?
I'm thinking, Kaylee Mekane, that's a pretty funny name just by itself. You don't even really need to editorialize that.
It could be, you could just be like not related or something.
Yeah. In fact, we had a name, or we had a story written by someone that was, Kaylee McKinney. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry. Leaves White House X months after Trump, and it's kind of, she just stuck around.
An undefined amount of months.
Yeah. Well, when we publish, we'll know the amount of months. But
yeah.
And then in a story about football and socially distant football practices, we talked about the quarterback Gary Peters, who moonlights as the United States Senator from Michigan, but is also our quarterback.
Okay. Wow. That's remarkable. That's great.
Tell us about the social media posts and like how you got those up. Are they connected with stories? I know that's like been the biggest part. Like I know that's got a lot of viewership among Pally students. So
well, we decided to launch with the social media posts because we kind of wanted people to be aware of us and not just get something in the mail in May and be like, yo, what's this? So we launched our Instagram account, which we kind of had the idea of putting out the similar content that the Onion does on Instagram, which is generally just pretty humorous headlines that everyone finds funny and, with an image on top. So those are pretty simple. We brainstormed for a while to decide, what the first one should be, because we didn't want to do anything too controversial or perhaps too esoteric for people to not understand. So in the end, I think our first post was school board preemptively announces Brent Klein's resignation at the end of the school year, which I think everyone understood because PAUSD has a history of extreme principal turnover.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I wonder what the record is like in the last decade or so, like who's been in office the longest. It might be Don Austin.
I don't know. I feel like there's definitely a principal at some elementary schools.
Sorry, not Don Austin.
Elementary schools probably.
Of course.
Yeah.
And
Mr.
then
Pearson, I remember.
Yeah.
from Duveneck. He's the principal of JLS now, but he was principal for at least 4 years of my 6 at Duveneck. I said Don Austin earlier. I meant our old principal, who I am now not even remembering the name.
Adam Paulson.
Oh no, Adam
Paulson,
Paulson.
Adam
was on
Paulson.
the-
That was a 2-year stay,
Adam
which is
Paulson
longer
was
than
for 2
most,
years.
but
That's longer than most. That's yeah. I have high hopes for Brent Klein. We'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
I like Brent Klein.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
sounds pretty
a really
good.
nice guy.
And then our process for the rest of the post, it's kind of, trying to think up something that's both relevant and funny to Pali students, which can be like a little tough sometimes because we want to like kind of ape what's going on nationally sometimes. So I think we said something about how I think we had something called Viking Week a few weeks back for Spirit Week points. I don't really know if anyone like actually did that, but I remember at the end the freshmen were in last. So we said something about how like, stop the count, these ballots shouldn't count, set tweets freshman class president after viewing the Viking Week results.
Timely.
And that was in November, so it was pretty timely at the time.
However, the freshman class representative did not realize that they would still lose if they stopped the count.
But we try to connect it to national events because a lot of people pay more attention in national news than, for example, what's going on here. And we also try to send a message with some of our posts. Our most successful post so far, I'm looking at it now, it was after hours of contentious debate, school board decides English and history teachers are expendable, which was after they decided that only English and history teachers would be returning.
Mhm.
Because we kind of wanted to, shine a light on how ridiculous the reopening plan was at the time.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
great.
Me and Ben actually came back to school last week, and do we think the reopening plan now is better? I think it's been better, more safe, and better thought out. But I don't know how the teachers union is. I don't think it's super happy necessarily.
Mhm.
And are there any aspects that you think that could be improved on in terms of safety, Ben?
I went in this week. Last week I went on Tuesday. It felt pretty safe. I gotta say, it seemed like there were 2 or 3 or 4 people in each of my classes,
Yeah.
not including the teacher, and we were very spread out. So definitely 6 feet apart. There were plexiglass screens in front of us. We were all wearing masks. Many people were double masked. The teacher was nowhere near us.
Mhm. Door open, air
open.
ventilators.
Filters on, everything. Personally, I didn't love it just because it felt a little bit redundant. I think that's what people expected is you go in and you sit on Zoom in a classroom and your teacher's also on Zoom. It was really weird to like talk to my teacher through Zoom when he was like a couple feet away from me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess like I think it was very, very safe. Like there isn't really much more they can do. In fact, I think it might even be a bit overkill. It's not entirely like, I think if anything, like I'm a little bit frustrated by the open campus rule. I understand why. And like, I think I have heard rumors that they're looking to lift that A through L versus M through Z requirement because of the sheer, like the very, very few numbers of people who showed up.
The thing about that though is like, I think I've heard from a fair amount of people that they like are like trying to hear from their friends about how it's going the first week and then going back the second week. And I feel like the more people that go back, the more people that are going to go back too. And like, if that restriction is lifted, like the cap on, there's going to have to be some cap. I don't think there can be like a thing where like school can be like above 50% capacity and still feel like 6 feet, everyone's 6 feet apart and fully safe. So
yeah,
I'm not sure they should like lift that restriction because that will like mean that some kids will have to stay home.
I personally haven't been back yet, but I was wondering kind of how things between classes work, brunch, lunch, passing periods. Have people been, keeping social distance during that? And how's that been looking?
Well, that's like the reason really, honestly, that I think they wanted to come back. Like the seeing teachers face to face is one, but just people who haven't been doing sports, they really have been in their houses for like a year if they're properly following guidelines and not really seeing anyone except for maybe people who are really close to. So it is really nice to see people you haven't seen in a long time and it's really nice to see like everyone's walking around. Generally, everyone was staying socially distant, following guidelines, like staying far apart when they're eating. I think administrators were walking and like making sure everything was safe and good, but they weren't really like, there's the walking lines. I don't know if that many people actually followed them, but there's these lines on the ground, like if you're walking like this way, you're on the right, this way on the left, to make sure there's like no traffic of people. But I don't know how well those work. There weren't even that many people, so there was not really necessarily a need. But I haven't actually seen an administrator talk or tell anyone to be distant, but at the same time, everyone was being pretty good about following the guidelines, and I think they understood the need for them.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's totally worth trying it out. In my opinion, I'll probably go back maybe once a week, not semi-regularly, just to see what it's like, but just to like keep doing it and see if it improves. I have a feeling that the restrictions will relax a little bit. I think that's kind of the way that things tend to go, but I would not necessarily discourage going back. It seemed very safe to me. If you have an at-risk family member, then be cautious about that and choose accordingly. But as somebody who is like ready to go back, I think that this is like totally fine. I think it's very safe. And yeah, I think it's worth trying out.
Thank you to listening to this edition of the Campionly podcast, and stay classy, Pally.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.